Good evening and welcome to Ask 11. I'm your host, David Magleby from the Department of Political Science at Brigham Young University. We're coming to you live tonight from the studios of KBYU, and we are pleased to welcome as our guest Gary R. Herbert, Governor of the state of Utah, who is here to take your questions. Governor, thank you for taking time to be with us this evening.
Well, thank you for inviting me. I'm honored to be here.
This drive on I-15 is not always easy in Utah County.
No, with the growth pressures that are taking place here in our state, and particularly along the I-15 corridor, and here in Utah County, it can get a little congested.
But it's making good progress.
It is. Actually, the I-core construction is doing well.
We would also like to welcome our studio audience, comprised of members of the community, with a large number of high school and college students here this evening. And Governor, I think you'd concur with me that interacting with young people like these students and community members who've taken a keen interest in politics is a way for everybody to learn.
I think we need to pay attention to those who are going to be in charge all too quickly, and we need to understand their hopes and dreams and aspirations and make sure they're prepared to take over the leadership roles that they're going to have as the rising generation.
Good point. To our viewing audience, this is your opportunity as concerned citizens to speak directly to one of our elected officials, Utah's chief executive. Our phone lines are open, and we invite you to call us with your questions toll-free at 1-855-801-1980. Let me repeat that, 1-855-801-1980. Or you can send us your questions by email at ask11@byu.edu, and 11 is spelled out. The phone number and email address will appear at the bottom of your screen throughout the program. For the next hour, Governor Herbert will answer your concerns and questions, along with questions from our audience in the auditorium. Earlier this week, we sent a camera crew to the cities of Ogden and Logan to ask people on the street about issues that are of importance to them. As time permits, we'll include some of their questions as well. Governor, before we get to our phone calls and our questions from the audience and from those interviews in Logan and Ogden, let me just ask you 2 or 3 questions. You have said that funding education is the highest budget priority. Given our disproportionately large number of school-age students, especially K through 12, but also higher ed, let's focus on K through 12 though, how are we doing in meeting that priority?
We've had a struggle. We are a fast-growing state, population-wise. We have a high birth rate and large family size. And with the economic downturn that we've gone through, called the Great Recession, we've had a hard time maintaining classroom size. In fact, our classroom size has grown over the last 3 or 4 years. But the good news is our economy is growing again. We're doing very well economically. And for us to continue to fund the growth in education is a top priority. We did it last year. My budget proposal will be to do it again this year and add a little bit more into public education and some for higher education. Clearly, for us to have long-term sustained economic growth in this state, an educated and skilled workforce is important. Hence, we need to make sure we prioritize education.
Now, I realize your budget statement and so forth is forthcoming in the legislature, but you gave us a hint there that there's going to be more funding for education. That's good news, I think, for Utah's parents of school-age children with large classroom sizes and other challenges.
It's good news for a lot of reasons, David. One, it shows that the economy is growing. That's been my focus since I've taken over as governor, to make sure that we have economic expansion and create more jobs. The folks here, for example, want to make sure that when they get out of school here, that there's a job waiting for them, some opportunity out there. And so the economy is growing in Utah at about 2.5 times the national average. We need to reinvest some of that growth money back into education to make sure that we have skills being taught that line up with the demands of the marketplace, whether public education or higher education. And the ability for us to now put and invest some of that growth money back in education is good news on many different fronts.
Let's chat a little bit about that higher education issue. Your Education Excellence Commission has established a goal of increasing the proportion of Utahns between ages 18 and 64 who have a post-secondary degree or a professional certification of some sort. Why is that a goal, number one, and how are we doing in meeting it?
Well, it's a challenge. I can tell you this is going to make us stretch. Some people think we're asking too much. But a few years ago, a professor out of Georgetown University, Professor Carnevale, who did a study of Utah, said that we've got to have that kind of education level and skills to line up with the demands of the marketplace. If not, our economy will not be as robust as it's capable of being. So we've got to raise the bar. We've got to challenge our young people and say, you know, you've got to make sure that you get something post-high school. We all know that if you want a good job, get a good education. That phrase we use all the time. And we see through the Great Recession that those who had a bachelor's degree, for example, the unemployment rate was just a little over 4%. If you had some college, it was about 9%. If you had a high school diploma, about 10%. And if you had less than a high school diploma, it was about 15%. So education and skills translate into economic opportunity. We know that if we challenge our people to provide better educational opportunities, we'll have a better economy in 2020. If we don't, we'll underperform.
Let's do one more question and then we'll go to our callers. The topic of energy is important. You have stressed that Utah will retain its energy independence. I suspect many in our audience didn't know we were independent in energy, thinking about that foreign oil that's so often talked about nationally. Help us know what you have in mind when you talk about the importance of energy and your agenda with respect to that topic.
Well, energy drives economic opportunity and quality of life. And you'll find around the country the states that are doing the best economically many times line up with those who are producing energy. Utah is blessed with opportunity to develop energy resources, whether it be traditional carbon-based fuels like coal, oil, natural gas, which we're finding in abundance now here in the state of Utah, alternative fuels like oil shale or oil sands. We have some renewables with biofuels. Hydro still has some capability here in Utah. Geothermal, hot water heat. Wind, which we're using in some abundance now. Solar, we have some, but it's not quite as commercially viable. All energy opportunities are what we need to seek in Utah to make us energy sustainable. What the public wants is sustained energy supplies that's affordable and cleaner. Now that's a challenge out there. We're using our universities here at BYU, University of Utah, Utah State, and other universities, a lot of research going on how we can be more environmentally friendly when we develop our energy resources, whether it be the extraction or the production of electricity. There's a lot of work that's going on to make sure that we have cleaner fuels, but still affordable fuels that's sustainable. That drives our economic opportunity. Because of that, for the first time in our state's history, I've developed a 10-year energy plan, an actual map going forward of what we can do in Utah. It's a work in progress. It's certainly not a final product, but it gives us a roadmap of energy sustainability in this state and energy independence. We actually export electricity.
Good.
That's a good thing. We do import some oil, but in the marketplace out there, the more we export, the better able we are to keep prices and costs down.
And control our own future.
That's right. And we've been named here just in the last couple of months by Forbes magazine the best place in America to do business. One of the reasons they cited is because our energy costs in Utah are 31% below the national average. Not only as we develop energy in Utah do we create jobs, particularly in rural Utah and other places with the research and the development and the manufacturing, but we also give competitive advantage to our businesses here on the Wasatch Front that say I can have a better bottom line because I don't have a large expense or a larger expense that you find in other states because of higher energy costs.
On that topic of energy, let's go to one of the recorded questions from Logan. Tate in Logan will be on your screen.
Governor, what is your office doing to promote green jobs and green energy?
So Tate, sounds like he's from Scotland, not Logan, wants to know about green jobs.
Well, people have asked about green jobs, and frankly, I don't care whether they're green, yellow, or brown. I just want jobs. I believe in the market. I believe that the marketplace will determine winners and losers. I'm a little reluctant to have government pick and choose what is successful. I know that's sometimes a rationalization for people to say, oh, we need to have green jobs, it'll perk up the economy. Maybe it will, maybe it won't, but the marketplace will make that decision. I would look at an example where the government has kind of intervened, good intentions, ethanol, Iowa. And we've subsidized the corn business there with ethanol to the point that we produce a lot of ethanol, but now we're finding it has a bigger carbon footprint. It is driving up the price of corn. It's hurting in Utah, our turkey business, our dairy business. It's hurting people in third world countries where they really do need corn to eat. It looks like to me that's been a failure. And it doesn't mean that biofuels don't have a role to play, but ethanol has been a mistake forced upon us by government. And so I'm inclined to, in our energy future here in Utah, to let the market pick the winners and the losers and drive the direction we're going. And there are people out there working on green energy, whether it be in some of our universities with biofuels. Wind power certainly is out there, and geothermal is a private development here by a company called Razor Technologies coming out of Utah County. Somebody will find the way to commercialize and compete with traditional fuels in the green fuel energy because the public's demanding.
Sure.
We want cleaner fuel, but we want it to be affordable too. And those are kind of at odds with each other. But somebody's going to find the technology that will unlock the opportunity to compete with traditional fuels with a renewable source.
Let's go to a question on the phone from Jan in Bountiful. Now, Jan, if I didn't get your name right, correct me, please.
Hello?
Jan, you there?
Yes, I am.
Great. Your question for the governor.
Yes, my question is, I was a victim of a house robbery, and the only way for me to get my products back at the pawn shops were to buy them back. I'm just kind of wondering what kind of law that was where I'm a victim and I have to buy my products back.
So she was victimized in a burglary and is told that to get her products back from the pawn shop, she has to buy them back herself.
Well, I'm sorry to hear that. That's and I, we all suffer with your misfortune. It's not a good thing to have crime of any kind, and you're a victim that are being victimized maybe twice. I don't know what the law is, and so this is probably a question for an attorney, your attorney, working with the county attorney to see what your rights are. I don't know what the pawn shop is saying, that if they've bought things on a pretense that we know this is stolen goods, that's against the law too. So it would seem like to me if you can prove the property is yours, you ought to be able to buy rights to get it back. Maybe that's part of the problem. My suggestion is you need to get an attorney and talk to the county attorney. It sounds like a local issue anyway.
We'd urge you to talk to your county attorney there in Davis County, Jan. Let's go to an email question. From Stephen. I have seen that your budget includes an increase of $160 million for Medicaid costs. What is your plan to control the rapidly expanding Medicaid program in Utah?
You know, that's a great question because it is the budget buster for all state budgets right now, Medicaid. It's the fastest growing part of every state's budget. It's the bane that we have because of a mandate out of Washington, D.C. Again, Medicaid being an exercise in trying to help people is out of control. And under the new Patient Protection Affordable Care Act, under its current structure, in the state of Utah, my budget will increase $1.3 billion over the next 10 years with its implementation. That's not sustainable. We can't afford it. We are actually presenting alternatives to the current administration for some waivers. For example, I proposed that we go paperless. So our communication between our Department of Health and Workforce Services with the recipients of Medicaid, we ought to email rather than use a typical paper trail. We were, in fact, applied many times, and we were denied that by the administration by email, of all things.
There's an irony.
Yeah. So it took me, actually, I had to talk to President Obama and say, hey, I've got an idea, what do you think? And he, of course, liked the idea, makes sense, saves Utah about $6.3 million and about $1 billion across the country. Says a great idea. And he hooked me up with Secretary Sebelius of the Health Department, and we got it worked out. But that's an example of finding ways and letting the states be more innovative. We can do more with less if we don't have so many strings attached. Yeah. So maintenance of efforts, eligibility requirements ought to be a state issue. We know how to manage the monies, and that will help us slow down the cost.
But this is going to be an ongoing issue.
Oh, yeah. And again, the corollary to this is just the cost of health care. Yeah. And again, that's a water cooler topic of the day. What are we doing about health care? We seem to be targeting the insurance companies when we ought to be targeting the cost of health care, the providers for the doctors and nurses, and when we go into the office, to what does it cost us for that service? So to that end, we've actually in Utah have had a healthcare summit here just a couple of months ago with all the stakeholders involved. We are actually doing something on a state basis to see what we can do to control the cost of health care, hence help the cost of Medicaid, and reduce the cost we're having to pay for Medicaid and help us to be able to balance our budget and not have Medicaid a budget buster.
Audience, let me remind you of that telephone number for you to call in your questions for Governor Herbert, 1-855-801-1980. You may also email us at ask11 at byu.edu. I would also remind you, both callers and those of you in the studio audience who will be asking questions, to keep your questions brief, allowing us to get to as many questions as possible in our program. We'll go to one from the audience now. Jesse, your question for the governor.
Hi, Governor.
Hi,
I have a
Jesse.
two-part. How are you?
Good, thanks. How are you?
I have a two-part question for you regarding nuclear waste. First, what are the positives of bringing additional blended nuclear waste into Utah? And secondly, why is waste being increased before a comprehensive assessment of possible dangers has taken place?
That's a great question. It takes a little bit of historical context to understand the issue. 26 years approximately ago, we allowed permitting for Class A level waste. It actually was more than that. We since have gone back and said you can't have any hotter waste than Class A. So Energy Solutions out at Clive, Utah has the right to bring in anything classified as Class A waste. You have this much radioactivity level you are able to take under the law. You can't take anything that's hotter than that. They've been taking in waste that's actually below the tolerance levels. Blended waste may be a little hotter than what they've taken in, but it's still below the top level of Class A waste. Legally, they have the right to take in Class A waste, which is in fact determined by a federal regulatory action. There's not any way to stop them. They've in fact provided opportunity to do an assessment of their storage capabilities, which has actually been designed for hotter waste. This is lower waste. And that's why the regulators in Utah have said they can go ahead and do that. Even though they're asking them to do additional performance assessment to just reassure us and the regulators that they're capable of storing the waste. The benefit or the negatives of it are it's a business. They have a right to, in fact, do what they've been permitted to do. They create jobs, they pay wages, they do what they do as a landfill, but it's a landfill for Class A low-level waste. And my job is to make sure that they're doing it according to the law, under their permit, to protect the public health, safety, and welfare of the people of Utah. And that's what our regulators are guaranteeing is taking place.
Let's go to a video question from someone in Ogden. Go to that now.
Hello, Governor Herbert. My name is Alex, and I'm a small business owner. And I have a very serious question near and dear to my heart. I know that your administration is working on regulations, getting rid of antiquated regulations that affect small businesses. And I'd like to know specifically what those regulations are and how they're going to help me, whether you're removing them or there's new regulations coming that are going to affect my small business.
Alex from Ogden about regulations. He's eager to get rid of some.
Well, I think we all are concerned about overburdensome regulations that stifle the ability of the business entrepreneur to make money and make a profit and be successful. At the same time, we understand the regulations are a necessary part of what we do to protect the public, to make sure there's oversight and accountability, and that there's level playing fields so that nobody's getting some kind of unfair advantage over somebody else in the marketplace. That being the case, I understand how important it is to have regulation reform. Steve Forbes, for example, has announced here recently that the regulations that we have in the country probably amount to about $1.6 trillion of additional cost for products and services. So Utah, this past year, I challenged as our last State of the State address that we in fact look and review the state regulations here in Utah. And we found out that in that process that there's about 2,000 regulations on the books. I asked the next question is how many affect business? About half. Then I said, let's go back and review and see if any of those are antiquated. Maybe they need to be removed, modified, improved. And we found that there's probably about 368 that fit into that category, which we're in the process of modifying and reviewing. We're making it better, more streamlined to get online, to pay your fees, your business licenses, different things of that nature, to make it easier for business to compete. That make it easier for people to get into business, make it easier for them to pay their bills and their licensing fees. So the streamlining we're doing here in Utah, I think, is going to be conducive, in fact, to an entrepreneurial environment which will help the small businessman. Now, let me just add to that, if I can, Dave. I traveled around the state earlier this year. That was a big topic, by the way, but it was the federal regulations that seems to be the most onerous for the business people of Utah. We're doing a pretty good job on the state level. We need to work with our congressional delegation to have the same kind of review of regulations on the federal level.
Well, and getting feedback from people like Alex and Ogden would be helpful. We'd like to remind you that our phone lines are open, and we'd take your questions. The number is 1-855-801-1980, or you can contact us by email at ask11@byu.edu. We'll go to Eric from Orem. He's here in our studio audience. Eric.
Governor, thank you for being here. Given the recent increase of individuals and families who are currently living in poverty, what is your administration's plan to assist those in poverty reach financial stability?
Well, the best thing we can do for anybody that's in poverty is give them a job, find an opportunity for them to, in fact, help themselves. And so that's why my focus has been entirely, number one, focus is on growing the economy, creating jobs and opportunity. And it's working. It's, our economy is growing at 2.5 times the national average right now. Our unemployment rate is dropping. We're down to 6.4% now. In the country, we're about 2.1% below the national average. We have the lowest unemployment rate from the Rocky Mountains west. Our economy is now the second fastest growing economy in America. So we're providing economic opportunity. Now, we understand there are people out there that are still hurting. And certainly there's a safety net aspect of what we need to do in government. But I would say to all of us that the first call we ought to make when we find somebody down the street that's in need, that needs some help, some food, help with a job, whatever their challenges are, ought to be to ourselves, not to the government. We ought to see what we can do as neighbors and individuals to help them out. And if we would do that, the charitable giving that we do in Utah is number one. Our volunteerism is number one, so we're doing pretty good, but we can do more. Government is not efficient in delivering services. It's too bureaucratic, it's too slow moving, it's not very nimble. You can see that in an example right now. I'll just say if you needed $1, I could reach into my wallet and I could give you $1 and you will get the whole 100 cents. If we have a government program, there's going to be administrative costs that come off the top, and the federal government is the worst. The time you get the $1 that I give to you through a federal system, it's about 38 cents at times that it arrives to your wallet, which means that 3 of us out here now have got to pay the $1 to get you the services you need. So the closer we can get it to the people, the better and more efficient we are in giving you help and assistance. The private sector has a role to step up and help with charitable care for those who are in need. My job is to make sure there's economic opportunity out there, and the safety net services that we have with government assistance are there too. It's a combination of everybody working together.
Let's go to Candace in Salt Lake. Candace, your question for the governor?
Hi, I wanted to go back to health care. I have a question about if there's any plan to include any dental in Medicaid or any affordable dental care for those that don't have access to it through health care coverage.
The budget right now does not include any dental care for Medicaid. It's an optional service through the Medicaid program. We're having a hard enough time funding the growth that's taking place in Medicaid just on the basic services. So we've got to take care of those first. It's been mentioned earlier, $160 million that we have to pay in the budget. We have growth money because of economic expansion that's taking place and additional tax revenues are coming in, is only $280 million. And if you've got to have to add another $160 million to take out of that to pay for Medicaid, it doesn't leave a lot left over for education and transportation and other health and human services needs that we have that we, the people, think the state should be involved with. So it's a challenge. And Medicaid is just so expensive, it's just been very difficult. Hence, no dental.
And this is an example of why making education the highest priority is important, because it's competing with Medicaid, transportation, and all of those other sectors of state government, and it speaks to the priority of education that you've given it.
Exactly. In fact, I've been back and testified at Congress on 2 occasions. One of them had to do with health care and the Medicaid problem. And the fact of the matter is, if I have to put more money into Medicaid, I have to put less money into education.
Let's go to Shirley on the phone. You're from Provo. Your question for the governor.
Hi. I've just been diagnosed and unable to work because of my illness. I continuously get ill and get terminated from my positions. And I want to learn a skill while I can't work, but I have no money, no funds. I have $100 in my checking account that is going to support me, or I'm going to be on the streets. And there's nothing out there that is helping me. What is your suggestion?
Well, I'm sorry for your health conditions. That's a difficult situation, I know, and I wish you well with that. Let me just give you a phone number. We have constituent services that you can access by calling area code 801-538-1000. 538-1000. Ask for constituent services. Tell us your situation. We'll refer you to some help. We have people in the Department of Workforce Services which are very good at trying to help line up people with additional training to give them skills so they can go out in the marketplace and find a job. We're very good at placement people. We're one of the best in the states for getting people off the welfare rolls, so to speak, government assistance, and back into society as a productive worker. So hopefully our people can help you find some opportunities to improve your skills and find some place in the marketplace that you will be able to adapt to.
And that constituent services number you gave, Governor, would be open to all residents of Utah on multiple topics, correct?
That's right. Again, it's a call-in center, and you can ask if you need to talk to Department of Workforce Services, UDOT, or transportation issues. They can refer you there. It's an easy number to remember. It's easy for me to remember.
And if the caller doesn't feel like they got a satisfactory answer, they can call it back.
And right, constituent service is very good. We've got good people there. Whatever your issue is, they'll get you in touch with people that can help you. Again, you may not always like the response and the answer, but you'll be able to talk to people who are making the decisions.
Let's go to an email question now from Patricia. She writes, because daylight savings time begins earlier now and ends later, it seems that too frequently during early morning hours, young people forced to walk to school in the dark are involved in accidents. What are the chances of Utah returning to regular standard time? I guess like Arizona.
Well, Arizona and Hawaii, I think, are the only 2 states that really have said we're not going to follow the federal model. I know it's been brought up. It's been talked about by one of our legislators. I like daylight savings, and there are some benefits that come with daylight savings that probably we don't want to give up. For example, it's in the summertime, we have a lot of Little League games and other outdoor activities which families can participate in because it's during the daylight hours. And you can't if we don't have daylight savings. The cost there has got to be factored in. The golf courses have a significant loss of revenue if we didn't have daylight savings. So that's an economic factor that needs to be looked at. So, you know, I think most people like daylight savings, some don't. But it's going to be debated, I think, at the legislature this year, and we'll see what happens. I think, you know, it's always healthy to talk about it. It's been brought up time after time after time after again. And whether it will pass or whether there'll be enough energy to change so we get off daylight savings time, I don't know. I'm a little dubious.
Is this an issue you care enough about to possibly veto it if it were to be overturned?
No, I don't. I think I'm a little bit more agnostic on that than I am. I do like daylight savings personally. It's worked for me and my family, but that doesn't mean it works for everybody.
Not that you spend a lot of time on the golf course.
No, but I have a lot of work that I need to do, and I like to do it in the daylight hours rather than at night.
Of course. Let's go to an audience question with Corrine. Your question for the governor, Corrine.
Good evening, Governor Herbert. I just want to ask about the new Clean Air Act. What motivated you to propose this new legislation, and what provisions will it include that improve on the current clean air standards?
Well, I need to know what Clean Air Act you're talking about. I know we're going to roll out here in the next week or two a Clean Air initiative to try to get everybody to get together. I'm very concerned about federal mandates that come in and are imposed upon us because we can't do it voluntarily. And I think we need to work on cleaning up the environment. All of us want to breathe clean air. We want to drink clean water. We have a responsibility to be good stewards of the earth. And I think we have the ability to do that. We have some unique challenges in Utah. We have these basins that we have here, and we have these inversions that take place. We've had them since the days of Brigham Young. But now we have a lot more people here. So the area issue is kind of compounded. We have health concerns. We have economic development concerns. So we're going to roll out, and I don't want to scoop my own scoop here in a week or two, an initiative that will give us all ideas of what we can do. It's going to take the work of all of us, industry, us as individuals, private owners, mass transit's part of it, being conservation-wise in what we do with energy. There's a lot of opportunities, I think, for us all to work together to make sure we have clean air to breathe.
Let's go to Gene in Springville. You're on the phone with the question for Governor Herbert.
Hi. My question concerns the highway construction throughout the state. We've had an awful lot of it. My question is, how is it being financed? What percentage is federal, what percentage is state, and what percentage is private? And how is that all affecting the overall economic situation in the state?
Well, transportation and construction is really a very key component part for our success long-term in a fast-growing state where our population is growing dramatically. Our business community has told us very clearly, if you want us to grow economically, we've got to have a transportation system that works. When I came into office, we were actually behind the curve when it came to transportation. So we've ramped up the expenditures on transportation. We have approximately about 175, 180 different construction projects throughout the state. We've been as high as about 212. We're spending about $1.5 to $2 billion in construction projects today. They're needful. The I-15 reconstruction we see here in Utah County is a needful construction project that will ultimately cost us about $1.7 billion. You're seeing $1.1 billion being done now. There's more yet to come. And again, it's good for us in a fast-growing community to make sure that we have not only just quality of life, but economic development opportunities. To that end, we have a transportation plan out there. And we're trying to do what we can to make sure that all of the system, meaning all 29 counties, are functional when it comes to transportation. It also includes mass transit, and whether it be the front runner, light rail, or bus rapid transit, it's all part of our transportation system.
And they're all proceeding on pace, or
That's
has
right.
one received more emphasis than another?
No, it's really a comprehensive approach, and we're building light rail out to the airport to help us with our tourism and travel and access to the airport and to downtown Salt Lake. The front runner's been successful. Again, it'll be constructed down into Utah County, which is going to enable us to have more mass transit out of Utah County. But the roads are still the biggest used.
And I think the caller wanted to also know about the share that was federal money versus state money.
Yes, a very important part of it. We basically are paying for all this with our own money when it comes to the roads and highways. We pay a federal tax when we purchase gasoline, that we get a portion of that back through the federal government and part of their transportation plan and their authorization. We get about $225 million a year. And that goes into building roads and maintaining roads that we have in our system. The I-15 reconstruction, for example, $1.1 billion, that's all our money. There's not really any federal money at all in that. Some people think that there is, but there is not. So most of the transportation money, probably 75, 80% of it, is all Utah taxpayers' money. Mm-hmm. We get some money back from the federal government from the tax we pay on our gasoline. I
think we did get some money from the federal government on the Salt Lake County I-15 because of the Olympics. Maybe we should bring the Olympics back. And
well, that's actually something we ought to talk about, because in 2022, I think we'll wait and see what the IOC decides to do and what the USOC decides to do. Maybe America will be back in play for another Winter Olympic bid, and Utah probably ought to take a look at that. But again, the money we got for the Olympics, though, was some that was kind of accelerated in anticipation of the Olympics. Again, we had probably some additional money that year and less money the following year with the help of some of our congressional delegation. But it comes in regular increments, and it's a big deal when they authorize the transportation funding. It's under debate right now in Washington, D.C. But it's a smaller part of our overall transportation.
For a large state like us with as many miles of interstate highways as we have, it's an important part of the piece.
Again, it's money we pay that we're getting back.
Right.
And, you know, I've gone back again, I'll just share this with you. I've gone back and testified again at Congress on transportation, met with a number of our own congressional delegation and others, and I've said to them, I will take less money. I'll take less money. I'll help you balance your budget, which we all need to have a concern about. If you'll eliminate the strings, I'll build more roads with less money if you'll let me not have, just block grant the money to me. So we're working on having less money and less strings, and everybody wins.
Let's go to an email question now. Governor Herbert, I was profoundly disappointed in your initial response to HB 477 that restricted the public's access to government records during the last legislative session. What are you doing to support open access policies and procedures within state government? And will you sign any bill that lessens public access?
Well, in hindsight, I can tell you that on 477, it would have been a lot easier for everybody if I just had vetoed the bill. It came to me with a veto-proof majority, and even as we had discussion, I said, I don't like the bill, I don't like the process. The idea of saying, look, we passed a grandma regulation, Government Records Access Act 20 years ago, which we did voluntarily. There's no mandate. The legislature took it upon themselves to say we want to have some kind of rules and regulations that have access to make sure that things are open and transparent. That was a good thing. But then technology advanced. You know, we didn't have the cell phone system and text message and emails and tweets and the things that we have today, and it's really, the statutes were kind of silent on that. So the idea of bringing it and updating it and having a review made some sense. The cram down the process is what really irritated people. What I signed, so everybody's clear, is I signed a modified bill of 477, which said, they came back, they pulled it back, they modified the bill. What I signed included a repeal and replace provision requiring us to have a 90-day study and a work group that included all stakeholders, and me calling them back into special session in June following the close of the legislative session. So I did support it. Again, the cow was out of the barn at that time, and there was a lot of misunderstanding to the point that I finally called them back into special session just to repeal the bill, and which they did, which means that we're now back to what we have on the books currently. There has been a working group that's worked. I think there will be some tweaks and changes, which will be a consensus bill that makes sense to everybody, including those in the media, the public at large, and the legislature.
But in principle, will you support any scaling back of the public's access to records?
No, I think the public needs to have openness and transparency. And by the way, the bill that was proposed originally didn't do anything to the executive branch. This really didn't do anything for us. And it was just, again, an idea of bringing things up to current speed with the new technology. But I think everybody understands we need to have openness and transparency, and I support that and will support it.
Jane from Grantsville, your question for the governor on the phone, please.
We have a Public Utilities Commission, Governor Herbert, that is all your appointees, and they are non-responsive to the public meetings at all. They sit there through the meeting and then do exactly the opposite of everybody that's been at the meetings. And I'd like to know why these are not elected positions.
Well, the answer to the question is because that's not what's been put in statute. That's not the legislation. If we want to make them elected positions, that's something we could run as a piece of legislation, and you ought to contact your House member, your senator in the legislature and see if they would run that piece of legislation and see if it could be changed. There may be some wisdom in doing that. Appointment to different commissions and committees is a difficult process, and we try to pick the best people, and I think most people are your neighbors. They are trying to do the best they can. I don't know the specific example that you would reference. I'm sure that there's times when they make great decisions, some maybe not so great. But that's the public opportunity to come in and complain and give public input, and then hopefully they'll respond to the public input based on the rules and regulations and the law that currently exists. Sometimes that's different than what the public likes, and that means we need to change the law. It's not that the commission is not acting irresponsibly, but maybe in conjunction with the law, they're acting very responsibly, and the law needs to be changed. So a lot of factors that go into them making decisions. My experience has been that because they're volunteer positions, they don't get anything out of it, is they're trying to do the best they can. If we think it ought to be elected position, let's change the law.
So in broader context, Jane's question, you're satisfied with the commissioners that are currently serving on the Public Utilities Commission in terms of their level of service and so forth?
I am generally. Again, we have, 150 different commissions and boards out there, and so it's hard for me to be intimately involved with all of them, even though I appoint many of them. But I do it with getting recommendations from different fields of expertise that would fill the requirements and the needs of that commission or committee. We have, I think, good response, and I think generally speaking, they've done a good job.
And occasionally you've taken action to make changes with some of these commissions and boards.
That's right, we have. And again, it's a challenging job to be on a commission where all you do is kind of there's nothing there necessarily other than public service that you get out of it, and an attaboy now and again, and yet you're making some very significant decisions.
Debbie from Orem on the phone for the governor. Your question.
Yes, essentially, we've been funding two public school systems, the charter school system and the normal public school system, for the last few years, and yet statistics from the State Department of Education's website show that many of the charter schools are not performing as well as the public schools are. My question is, at what point do we call this program a success or a failure, and do we hold the two to the same measurement standards?
Well, I would say I don't know the statistics you're quoting that show that the charter schools are failing. I know we have about 82 charter schools right now and waiting lists for people trying to get into charter schools. I think it's a very complementary part of our public education system. Charter schools are, in fact, a part of the public education system. And I think, by and large, most people that attend them, parents and students, would consider them very successful. Doesn't mean that there's not some problems out there. There's problems in public education. There's problems with private education. So there's nothing that's absolutely perfect. That being said, the good thing for people is they can choose. You can go to public education in a charter school environment, or you can go to in a traditional environment. There's more choice out there than ever before. And I know that as we have our Education Excellence Commission meet together, and we do once a month, I think everybody feels good about the overall system and as it works together. Can we have improvements? Probably can, but I don't think anybody thinks that it's a failure. I think the public education system, including that charter school part of it, is doing very well.
Let's go to a question from the audience. Tyler, your question.
Good evening, Governor Herbert. Last year, you talked about a jobs bill that would create 100,000 jobs in 1,000 days. And tonight you've talked about economic activity and opportunity. Are you still planning to implement that bill? And if so, how will that differentiate from President Obama's bill plan?
Well, I don't know what President Obama's bill plan is. Mine's an initiative, meaning that we are working together out of our Governor's Office of Economic Development to say we have a goal. We want to create 100,000 jobs in 1,000 days. That number came because at the time we had about 102,000 people that were unemployed. So we used that as a number and thought we could encourage the private sector to accelerate their economic expansion and create jobs. The good news for us is that right now, with the latest unemployment figures dropping down to 6.4%, we are now down to about 85,000 people that are unemployed. So we have actually made headway just in the process of discussing it as our economy continues to expand and jobs are being created. So yeah, we're moving ahead on it. We're trying to make sure that this state of Utah is the most business-friendly environment in the nation and a global business destination. Our exports are up. We have led the country in exports the last 5 years. I've challenged our business community to double the exports over the next 5 years. Good news is we're up 38% in this past year, the last 12 months, meaning that we're ahead of the record pace we had in 2009 and 2010. That translates into more jobs. Again, everybody ought to have the opportunity to have a job. And I won't rest until every Utahn has that opportunity and our unemployment rate drops to reasonable levels.
Let's go to a question on the phone from Robert in Springdale. Robert, your question for the governor.
Yes, Governor. I'm 90 years old and voted in many elections, but many of the towns in Utah now have a mail-in ballot. And I'd like to ask your opinion that why should a voter have to pay to send his, pay to vote? I consider that a form of a poll tax. I've contacted Lieutenant Governor Bell, and he says that they recommend that each municipality and county and what would pay the cost. I think it should be mandatory that they pay the cost because it affects people of my age and the poor and many people. And maybe 45 cents to send in a ballot isn't very much. But if you're hungry, that 45 cents could be used for something much better than mailing in a ballot. And that's why I think that our actually the voter percentage is way down because a lot of people aren't going to fool around buying stamps.
Thanks for calling, Robert. Governor?
Well, Robert, congratulations on being 90, first of all.
And voting.
And voting. And the fact that you're involved and concerned is impressive to me, and I hope people can take your example and motivate themselves to be involved. I think we want to make it as convenient as we can for anybody to participate and vote. It's not just a matter of being elderly. It's also a matter of people that do have maybe lack of disposable income or bedridden, home-ridden. That was I think, the reason behind having the ability to have an absentee ballot and mail it in, as opposed to having to journey down to the polling place and cast a ballot in person. So they're trying to make it more convenient. There is a responsibility that comes with it, and whether that's having somebody pick an individual up and a family member and a friend or a neighbor and help them. Let me take you down to the clerk's office and we'll cast a ballot and we'll save you the 45 cents. There's opportunities and options out there. If we need to change the law, I think that's worth debating. That's a clerk issue, and each of our clerks in our 29 counties are really the chief election officers in the state. They're the ones that have to run the elections. We oversee it out of the lieutenant governor's office. But I think we're trying to do as best we can with the budget we have and the finite number of funds to make sure people have the opportunity to cast a vote for initiatives or issues or candidates of their choice. And I think we've got a pretty good system actually in Utah. I think there's other issues that cause us to have lower voter turnout.
Let's go to Barbara in Salt Lake. Your question on the phone for Governor Herbert.
Mine is really just a thank you for a great program to have the governor available to answer our questions. And I wanted to thank him for explaining how important it is to keep our dollars within our own state so we don't lose so much into the federal government, and it gives us 3 times the ability to use our own money. I also want to tell him that I am totally for daylight savings time like he is, because I do believe it makes a big difference to my life and those around me. So thank you, Governor, and thanks for the program.
Well, thank you. Hey, we need more callers like you.
You don't get many pats on the back, Governor. I think you should take that one. We've got an email question from Ken. Can you please tell us how much money is being spent from taxpayer coffers to sue the federal government, arguing that dirt paths in the desert are actually roads? If Utah were to win such a lawsuit, who would pay to maintain these roads? Or I guess he would say dirt paths.
Well, that's part of the debate. We have a right, a state right, based on the federal law of 1976 called FLIPMA, that we have roads and rights-of-way, which in fact are roads and rights-of-way in our state, that we have opportunity and responsibility to keep and maintain. It's become a bigger issue here in Utah because of the debate on wilderness. And wilderness is defined as areas that are roadless. And so for those who are concerned about wilderness being defined in areas that really are not wilderness, they're saying, look, there's a road here. You cannot, in fact, call this wilderness. That's part of the historical debate. For some reason, Utah's been ground zero on this. We've come up with a process to, in fact, work through this and maybe use a little common sense, going county by county and having everybody come to the table and say, this is wilderness, this is not. We can debate and compromise over some in the middle here. And we did that in Washington County and had very success in taking that legislation to the Congress, and they passed it. And that's the only way you can create wilderness. We also are doing a pilot program with the Department of Interior and saying, look, we think these are roads, and you agree they're roads. Let's just agree and shake hands and move on. We're going to see if that can work. Some are easy to ascertain, others are not. But we're running out of time from a legal standpoint. So we've had to, in fact, say to the Department of Interior, we will sue you on these roads because this delay after delay after delay is we're going to lose standing as a state. And we own these
and
roads.
Therefore, de facto, it'll become wilderness.
Yeah, exactly. Or the determination will be that these are not roads when in fact they could be and very probably are. These roads are owned by the counties and by the state jointly. So we have to protect our legal rights by filing suit. We hope that we can negotiate the resolution of this as we go over time, but we cannot afford to give up our legal rights. That's why we're suing.
And I think Ken wanted to also know about how much this is costing.
Well, the work's being done by the counties. They've been doing it from the days I was a county commissioner, and I was elected here in Utah County back in 1990. That's how long this goes back. It's frustrating that we're making no headway, and it seems like we're just fighting and fighting and fighting. So the cost is being borne mostly by the counties in collecting all the data and the evidence and testimony from people who say, yeah, that's where my ranch, that's where we watered the cows, we've been using this as a road for generations. And they may look like cow trails to somebody, but they've been roads and rights of way for somebody else. We're trying to make that determination. The Attorney General's office, and when we file litigation and lawsuits, there's a cost. It's part of the overall Attorney General's office budget. There's not a special additional money for these efforts. It's just part of the ongoing operation of the Attorney General's office.
Great. Phone call from Stacy in Salt Lake. Your question for the governor.
Yeah, my name is Stacy Schronen, and I'm 45 years old, been a Utah resident my whole life, and recently have been kind of discouraged with the fact that it's my understanding Utah rejected the unemployment extension that was offered by the federal government, and I wonder why we would do that and not look out for those who are in need here within the state, in a state that's already a hard place to sustain a job with it being a right-to-work state.
Well, actually, our state's doing much better than virtually any state in America when it comes to creating jobs and economic opportunity. We are the second fastest job-creating state in America right now, behind North Dakota, which is basically all energy-driven right now with their oil fields up in North Dakota. So everybody's having challenges, and we have unique challenges, and you're facing maybe some yourself. The legislature felt like, and I agree with the principle, we cannot as states continue to go back to Washington, D.C. and ask for more and more money to fill the holes in our own budgets and then complain about them having a $15 trillion debt. It's going to take all of us living within our means, not going more and more into debt, which is going to hurt the economic outcome in America. Part of the challenge we have in this country right now today is the uncertainty of what's going to take place in the future, caused by $15 trillion in debt. And so if we're going to get the economy growing again and get out of its sluggish mode and create jobs and economic opportunity, we have to start living within our means. And so the state of Utah said, you know what, we're not going to exacerbate the problem. We're going to control our own destiny here in the state of Utah, finding Utah solutions to Utah problems, and our economy is now growing.
But are the unemployed the vehicle that ought to be used to make that message to Washington?
Well, I think it's all government programs. Again, it's a matter of how much are you going to say to the federal government, give us more money, give us more money, where are you going to draw the line? The legislature said, you know what, we can live with what we've got now. We'll try to do what we can here in the state of Utah. And our economy, again, is growing. And by the way, the states that are having the most success nationally right now tend to be right-to-work states. Utah's a right-to-work state, and our economy is more robust than virtually any state in America. So our process, you know, is not perfect, and we certainly have got some flaws in it. But overall, the outcomes we're getting in Utah are the envy of virtually every other state in America right now. So we're doing something right.
Governor Herbert, thank you for coming tonight and for your willingness to discuss some of the topics that are important to the people of Utah. As you've seen, they're across a wide range, and there's a lot of passion and feeling from those callers that we've had tonight. We'd also like to thank you, our audience, including our studio audience, for being here and participating in this program. This program, Ask 11, connects viewers with experts who can help us know what resources are available to make our lives a little less stressful. KBYU 11 has a strong commitment to provide the people of Utah with quality programming. In keeping with this charge, we invite you to stay tuned immediately following this program for Beyond the Light Switch, an important look at the future of energy. As we've discussed some aspects of Utah's energy this evening, you may be interested in this additional information as America faces the challenge of developing a new infrastructure for electricity. We'd like to invite you to visit our website at kbyutv.org, where you can view past episodes of Ask 11, or link to information on a variety of topics designed to help Utah families. We hope you found the information presented tonight helpful and enlightening in your lives. I'm David Magleby for Governor Herbert and all of us at KBYU 11. We hope you'll join us again soon. Thank you. We get to talk because